Welcome to Actions and Limits. My name is Justin Atherton. I'm the Peak Performance Consultant for Confidence Unchained. With me as always is Paul Fortune. Paul is a mindset coach and the founder of A Call to Action. And together, we make Actions and Limits. Welcome to the show, the podcast where we talk about the actions we can take and the limits we create. Remember to subscribe to the show so you don't miss a single episode. You can find us on YouTube. You can also find us on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Paul, we've got a very interesting guest coming up, a guest that spent 25 years in prison for murder and, got out, after, believing they're going to have a life sentence. And, man, that's crazy. I'm really excited to bring her out and kind of pick her brain and see, what process she's gone through. It's got to be, that's got to be crazy being gone for a quarter century, right?
Very inspirational. I can't wait to talk to her because, so often, and better than I do, Justin, that, when you get something like life in prison and you see these prisoners, it's done. I mean, they got nothing to live for. So, it's very important to find some sort of purpose. And I would imagine that's going to be extremely hard to find a purpose when you're spending your life in prison. And I hear that you have a story about somebody that has a restaurant nearby you that has an inspirational story about being in prison and
Sure.
and going out of it thriving.
Yeah. I mentioned that there's a restaurant near me here in Conroe, Texas. It's called Honey Bee Ham, Bee Ham, and it's a great sandwich place. I love the food there. And I went in there one day, and the owner started talking to me, and he told me his story about how he was in prison, and he ended up, writing the business plan for his restaurant while he was in there. And so he realized shortly after he had been in there, he's like, this is no place I want to be. He's like, I am not coming back here. And so he started, writing his business plan and putting things together. So he had a plan when he got out. He at least had that light at the end of the tunnel. So he found his mission and said, when I get out of here, I'm creating my business and I am never coming back to this horrible place. Obviously a little bit different insight there than our guest, Sheena, that's coming up. But think about that takes some drive. That takes some actual realization on what's going on and going, hey, I need to fix my life, before I can even return to it, and have that plan in place so I don't go down the same rabbit hole that I've gone, at the beginning of my life. So.
Absolutely powerful stuff. So let's bring her on. I'm excited to talk to her.
Yeah. So let's bring out, it's Sheena Renea. So we're going to give a little background story on Sheena Renea. Sheena got married when she was barely 15 years old to a man who was abusive. 2 years later, she found herself incarcerated with life without parole. She spent 25 years in prison when her sentence got overturned. She did everything she could to better herself. She learned to love herself, how to use her traumatic childhood to catapult her up instead of holding her back. She learned how to love herself for all of her flaws. She turned them around, and she ended up becoming a motivational speaker and a coach while inside prison. After being sexually assaulted, abused mentally, physically, and emotionally, she learned those processes, how to overcome all that, and to share those stories with other inmates in there. She also became a personal trainer while in the prison system and loved helping women discover their true selves and she's working on getting her degree and coaching certificate. And now she's, working on creating a nonprofit business called Prison Did Not Break Me. Paul, I'm really excited to hear her story and to see, how she views life after that long in prison. So let's welcome out Sheena Renea. All right, everyone, welcome Sheena Renea to the show. Sheena, we're excited to have you on the Actions and Limits podcast.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
So Paul and I have been talking about you have a very interesting bio. A lot of interesting topics I think we could go in here, but tell us a little bit about your story. Go into this in your ride, the things that you've gone through that have led you to where you're at now. I know it's a big, long story, but, dive into that a little bit for us.
It is a long story. I capture usually the attention of that. I did 25 years in prison first had life without parole, but it all began when I was younger. I grew up in a sexually abusive home. And as I got out of that, I ended up back with my natural mother. And by that time I was angry. I met a man when I was 14. I was married when I was 15 to a man who was almost 21. He was abusive sexually, mentally, physically, emotionally. And there's nothing I could do. Restraining orders, there was just no way out. By 17, my boyfriend had shot my ex-husband, and I was on my way to prison with death by incarceration by the age of 17 years old. 55 days after my 17th birthday, I ended up in prison.
Wow.
So, yeah, I spent 2 years and 9 months in county jail. In that time in county jail, also the time in there was pretty difficult. I was young, and while I was in there, I was raped by a deputy. And the reason that part story is important is because it comes up later. They locked me in my cell. They told me that I couldn't have visits. I couldn't talk to my family. Nothing. The phones were shut off until I agreed that I would never speak about it. So by the time I hit prison at 19, I was an angry young woman who was not ready for the responsibility of my past. And so I just started to rebel in prison. I got in a lot of trouble. I went to the hole. I was always doing different things. And in 2004, I took a class, and it's called Impact of Victims of Crime. And it shows you the impact you have when you make a choice to commit a crime on other people. That class changed my life because it spoke about the victims of crime. It spoke that when we make choices like that, we change people's lives. We change our community. We change the victims' lives, our friends, our families, everybody. And that's when I started realizing that I needed to change and that I wanted to be different.
I have a question about that. So that's an interesting concept. Focusing it on the victims. How did that shift in your perspective? How did that resonate with you? Like what about that, changed what was going on in your head?
Once I became a facilitator and I started teaching, but right at that moment, what changed was a victim came in and I seen her pain. I seen what she went through because she had lost her husband to murder. And all of a sudden I seen my victim's family. And no longer was it about what he had done or I had done. It was about the pain I had caused so many others. And it just changed my perspective about it all. And then, go ahead.
Tell me about the instructor that you had. You must have had a great instructor in this course because it had to
resonate with you, right?
It wasn't the instructor itself. It was the victim that came in. She
is
the one. Yes, because it was like all of a sudden I seen my victim's mother standing there. I seen her pain. And no longer was it about as I became a facilitator right after that, I started teaching a class. And what happened was I realized that, you know, nobody cared that I was sexually abused or I was raped as a child or any of these things, because once I made a victim, nobody cared that I was a victim. Because who cares? If I take your son's life, you don't care if I was sexually molested. You
Sure.
care that your son's gone. And so that's what resonated with me. It was taking responsibility and accountability for my actions that caused somebody to lose their life.
Well, that's a powerful lesson to learn, right? You know,
Yes.
you know, the repercussions of the actions that we take, you know, whether it's on our own lives or other people's lives.
And when you're a teenager, you don't, and it's not an excuse by any means, but you do not think of long-term consequences. You're impulsive. You think of, I want to stop right now. And what a lot of people didn't realize is when I got to prison, I was finally free. Nobody could abuse me. Nobody could rape me. I was finally free. And that's hard for some people to understand.
Well, there had to be an element of self-love through this discovery period, you know, taking this course, seeing this victim, but there's had to have been this internal journey that you had to take to really change your direction, correct?
Yes. When I was always a follower when I was younger, I definitely didn't even know my own favorite color. You know, whoever I was around, that's who I was. And so I was influenced very easily to do stupid stuff, as sometimes we are. But when you grow up in an environment where you never learn boundaries, integrity, values, or morals, and strangely enough, I learned all those in prison, because in prison it's about respect, loyalty. Your word is bond. And if you don't do those things, it's trouble in there. And so I actually met wonderful people that, you know, the world think are terrible, who actually taught me to love myself. And I took a lot of classes. If I took domestic violence, I turned around and taught it. If I took breaking barriers or whatever class I took, I would turn around and facilitate it and become a teacher, because I had decided that even if I was going to spend my rest of my life in prison, I was going to be the most successful person in prison.
It is an interesting thing to see. So Sheena, something you probably don't know about me. I don't know how much you've researched the show before you get on, but you know, I've been in law enforcement for about 14 years, and I did start my career in the Texas prison system, where I worked for a while. And it is interesting to see, you know, the inmates or the offenders that have been in there a while, and to see that the lessons that they learn and the different projects, because there are a lot of different projects over the last 20 years. Probably back in the 70s and 80s, prison was a very different place to be than it was, you know, within the last, you know, 20 to 30 years. So, and I'm sure you saw a huge change or a huge shift over the 25 years that you spent in there as well.
Oh, yes.
But those programs, you know, the people that take them serious, right? Because I know you saw the ones that got in there just to, you know, be out of the dorm rooms or just to be in the AC, whatever the case was.
Absolutely. No, I didn't know that. But yes, you know, you can either go to prison and you can never change, or you can go to prison and you can take every class available to you. Rehabilitation is really about choice. It all comes down to choices, no matter what. You know, you either want to be better, or you choose to not be better. You can you can choose to let prison make you bitter and hateful and animalistic, or you can choose to let it change you and become the person that you were supposed to be in the first place before you made bad choices.
So as a teacher in those aspects, in those different classes, how did you relay that message, or how did you see, you know, impacting some change in some others that were in the same place as you?
Well, because I stayed on the victim mentality for a long time. I was the one abused. I was this. It was all about me. And so I had to learn, I had to get off that pity pot. And as I tell people, flush the toilet. And so basically I was in their face. And if I could change, you can change. And I felt like people need the truth, and so I wouldn't sugarcoat anything. And that's how I taught my classes. And I got respect for that, because I'm not going to sugarcoat things and let you play the victim when you've created victims. It's not about us anymore. When we're sitting in prison, it's about the victims. They don't get an appeal from the decision you made in their life. They don't get to appeal the robbery that happened to them, the murder that happened to them. They don't get to appeal that you shoplifted from the store. That's already done. We have appeals. And so, you know, a lot of people are like, wow, I don't believe that you think like that and you were an inmate, but I do, because the victim should have more voices than we do. Absolutely.
Sure.
I got a question. You know, I'm sure there were so many bad days mentally that you had in prison. You know, even when you made this transformation and you started teaching classes and going forward, because I mean, at some point in time, it comes in your mind like, I'm never going to be leaving this place. So what did you do mentally to keep yourself up? Because I would imagine that's sometimes a tough thing to do.
It was. There was times I had attempted suicide. There were suicidal thoughts, a lot of depression. Friends got me through. In 2007, I found my higher power, as some people call jailhouse religion, but I found a spiritual walk that worked for me. But I stayed in books that were about positive thinking. You know, you have to stay positive. I became a personal trainer and group instructor, did yoga, and I taught classes and exercised a lot, and that helped mentally. I took 5 years of really in-depth counseling. I used the counseling that they offered there. And like I said, I took every opportunity to change anything. I mean, I went as far as asking my friends around me, what about me should I change? And they made a list. Yeah, I was surprised that they did. They made a list, and I was like, okay, yes, I need to work on these things. And I simply started really at a foundation. I sit down, and the first question I remember asking myself was, what is your favorite color? And I decided I don't have a favorite color. It's just whatever I feel when I wake up that day. It's whatever color I like. I don't have to be in a box. But I had to go through as far as hopeless days. And like I said, other women inspired me to get up out of bed every morning, because if I could help them not come back to prison or do drugs again or commit more crimes and more victims, then I was a success in prison.
Well, that's pretty powerful. But you talk about some of those hopeless days. Like, did you have any light at the end of the tunnel? I know you talked about the appeal process, but you know, you were sentenced to life, correct?
My actual sentence was death by incarceration. So yes, I was supposed to die there. The law changed in 2017. Anybody under the age of 18 could not have life without parole because
Sure.
the brain was not developed. That law helped me. I was the first female in Missouri to get out under that law. However, there's a lot of juveniles still fighting for that. But that's where I talk about the rape came in, because 17 years later, it kind of helped me in the county jail, because suddenly the deputy that raped me had more victims. And so they needed me, and they found the videos of him coming in my cell and those different things happening to me. And so that helped open the door for the prosecutor to look at some things. I had jury members on my trial that went to church with my victims. So I'm from a very small town. It was the good old boy system.
Sure.
Half the officers that investigated my case was also my ex-husband's high school buddies. So a lot of different things happened that changed that. But what helped me every day when those really dark days would come, prayer, exercise, and there was days that I felt like not getting out of bed, but then somebody would knock on my door and they were having a rough day, and so I would help them, and it would take away from my own suffering.
Well, talk about the euphoria when you got the news that you were going to be released. I mean, you must have been jumping for joy, a day that you thought would never come.
I was flipping for joy. And actually, you know, the media came because our case was pretty high profile, and the media came to watch me walk out the door. And of course, I walk out after 25 years. I have a small box, as my whole life is in a box. But I remember I had to go to have surgery when I was in prison on my knee, and there was a stoplight right outside the prison. I thought, you know, if I ever get out of here, I'm going to jump and run around the car at this stoplight. So, because I'm not shackled and handcuffed and black boxed. And it happened, the light turned red right as we left the prison, and I suddenly jumped out of the car and took off running. My mom's like, "What are you doing?" and I just had my hands up free and screaming, I'm free, I'm free.
Hmm.
And so it was, but coming out was harder than going in. And a lot of people don't understand that, you know, I walked into Casey's and suddenly got a headache because of all the color. I've been in drab for 25 years, and they asked me what I wanted to drink. And I was like, I don't know, water. And she's like, which kind? And all of a sudden I was overwhelmed with choices. And then I discovered PTSD from being in prison. So my struggle has still been since I've been out.
We'll talk about that a little bit more, about your struggles, because I'm sure there's people listening here that may struggle with that as well. What did you do to overcome that, or what are you doing to overcome that?
Well, when I first got out, I just started with my feet on the ground. I just started looking for jobs and things like that. That was not probably the smartest thing to do because I got overwhelmed really quick. But simple things. When I got locked up, there was no cell phones, no internet, none of those things. And all of a sudden I was connected to the whole world who just, 25 years ago hated me. And I came back to the small community that the crime happened in. So everywhere I went, I felt like everybody was looking at me, that they knew who I was. And that wasn't true. I really haven't really had any negative. I've had a lot of positive, because a lot of people knew how shady the trial was, how shady things had happened. I deserve to go to prison. I'm not saying that at all. I definitely deserve to do time. But I also, a lot of things were not told truthfully. So as I came out, I just had to rediscover who I was, because in prison I was the instructor that instructed everybody. I was the teacher. I was the person that everybody came to. I started a ministry in there. I did all these things. And then I come out and I'm like, who in the world are you now? Like, I had no purpose. And I actually met a guy, and he did 2 tours in Iraq, and he's a veteran, and he understood PTSD. So he helped me get through those moments. If I heard a loud door bang, or if I heard metal clanking like handcuffs, he knew exactly how to just breathe. It's okay. You're safe, you know, and that's how I got through those days. And driving helped a lot. I drive
You
like
doing the driving or somebody else driving?
No, I do the driving. I still drive like I'm 17. You got to remember, I just had my license a few years, so I might have hit a few curbs along the way, but it's all right. The car's still running. But I just had to get through. For those that are coming out, that maybe are listening to your show, it is a struggle, and I think that we have to, our families don't know how to deal with this either. We don't know how to deal with coming out, and people that you're coming home to don't know how. You know, sure. and I'll have to say I have a great parole officer who really worked with me on a lot of different things, but I just had to find different ways to deal than I did before, and working out has definitely been a big one for me.
Yeah, that's definitely a theme that we talk about on the show a lot. You know, I'm definitely into working out, and different guests we've had come on talk about the benefits of that. One thing you mentioned, I think resonated as well, that lack of a purpose when you left, because it seemed like you really identified with the position that you put yourself in the prison, and being that mentor and being that coach for other people. So what did you find outside of, you know, in the free world to replace that and to find yourself again?
Well, I would actually, people would start calling me all the time that were struggling with addictions, or people that I had taught in the prison suddenly were contacting me out here saying, hey, I need your help. And so I started coaching them out here and helping them. I even had one friend I spent a whole weekend with, detoxed her, got her, you know, back on her feet and doing what she needed to do. So all of a sudden I found my purpose again by helping those that were still coming out and struggling. I just, like a week ago, started a group just for people that have been incarcerated, or families or friends who support, you know, second chances. And it's my boyfriend and I was sitting here, and I was like, you know, prison did not break me. And all of a sudden this light bulb come on. I was like, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to help people struggling coming out of prison. And our group grew from over a week. It's almost 600 members now. And
wow.
people just sharing the struggles and connecting. And even a few people have gotten on there and said, hey, this just saved my life, because I felt alone, and I thought I would commit suicide. So I have found my purpose. It's going to start a nonprofit organization to help people like me coming out after a long time, because I also think that we need to educate families and friends of people coming out, because you may not know how to handle it, you know, what the triggers are or what's going on with me, and so that's what I'm doing now. I'm living my purpose. I did 25 years for a reason, and so I feel like it's still helping other people.
What advice would you give somebody just coming out of prison? They spent, let's just say, 10 to 15 years in prison, and now they're on parole and they're leaving for the very first time. What would you tell that person when they first get out? What would be the best advice?
Sit down, take a breath, and just take a moment to embrace that you're home. Take a moment to embrace your surroundings. I think sometimes we've been locked in and we haven't got to do so much for so long. So when you get out, you want to hit the ground running. I want to go here, I want to go there. And really just sit at home. You know, we've sit in a cell for years. You can definitely sit at home for a minute, take a breath, gather yourself, really think about what you're wanting to do, and don't feel pressure from those around you, because you know, when you're locked up for a long time, you come home to people you don't know anymore. They've changed and you changed. My mom kept treating me like I was a 17-year-old kid when I came out. I'm like, Mom, I'm 42. You can't tell me what to write on Facebook. So, I mean, or you can't tell me where I can go. But that's just protective. But I would say somebody freshly coming out, utilize that PO as well. Utilize them. Ask them your resources. What can you do? And if you feel like it's traumatic, don't be afraid to get counseling or support from somebody. We need it.
What would you say are some of the biggest things that you took away from your time in there and your growth, you know, going through that process in 25 years? What were your biggest takeaways?
Every choice I make has a ripple effect, whether it's good or bad. And if I just take, and I used to teach this to the ladies in there, if I just take 15 or 30 seconds and think, what is the consequence of this decision? It will lead me in the right path every time, instead of impulsively making decisions in temporary emotions. You know, you can permanently change your life in a temporary emotion. So I took that choices matter. No matter what, I have to make the right choice. And if I make the wrong choice, and I'm the only one that's accountable for my actions, I can't blame anybody else for that. You know, people have been sexually abused, people have been raped, things have happened to them, and they still didn't go to prison. They still made decisions and were successful and did great things with their life. So I think I also took away from it that I don't have to let my past define my future.
Oh, that's pretty great. So you mentioned the Prison Did Not Break Me group. So is that the main project you're working on right now? Is that like your little pet project right now, like building this, nonprofit?
It is. It's been nonstop. The girls and men, we've welcomed men and women and their families to the group. And it's just, I stay with it all day long, because if somebody's struggling, I want to make sure I'm there and be like, hey, we're okay. We're here. Somebody's here. But also, you know, writing all the grants and all those different things you have to do for a nonprofit. I'm learning. That's a long process, but I got a great team, and that's helping me. But I'm also going to start my own podcast hopefully soon. I'm a little nervous about it, but it's going to be talking to people that come out of prison who are struggling, and tell their stories of success, so that maybe we can take the stigma off that not everybody in prison's bad. There's good people in there that just made some bad choices, and hopefully change that a little bit.
On your group, is it virtual? Can anybody in the States join your group, or do they have to be local?
No, anybody in the world can join it. It's for anybody that's struggling or needs hope. And even if you weren't in prison and you're just struggling, and we're all there, it's definitely, but we wanted it for people struggling coming out of prison as well as their families, because maybe you're a father to a son that just came home and you don't know what to do. And so, like, we'll post things on there. What are your biggest struggles being home? What are the greatest things that you're doing? So people can read and be like, oh, this might be a struggle for my loved one coming home. Let me watch for this. And we've also, everybody on there, we're like, hey, who's hiring felons? And then all of a sudden everybody just starts posting, hey, there's a job here, there's a job here, there's a job here. Because so many times I've had so many interviews with jobs and they're like, we love you, you're perfect, your resume, you can't even tell you were in prison, but and mine was almost 30 years ago now, and I'm still impacted about not finding a job. Burger King would not even hire me.
Oh, wow.
So, when you can't even get a job at a fast food and then COVID hits, well, I'm definitely the last man on the list to get hired, which I understand that, but it's hard to find a place to rent. People even put it in the ads. If you're a felon, don't apply. And so I want to change that stigma that, sometimes it's worth taking a chance, because if, like you said, you worked in corrections, you'd probably rather have a lot of those long timers around you than you would have them short timers that came coming in and out.
Sure.
Didn't care. You know what I mean? Because
exactly.
they didn't care. Those long timers, though, that was their life, and they cared, and there's some that we respected staff so much that we would stand up for the staff.
And like you said, you mentioned it before, that one moment of, like, acting on those emotions, those high emotions, can change your entire life. It doesn't mean that you are a lifelong criminal if you end up in prison. It means that you made at least one really bad decision, based on the emotions going on, but that doesn't make you a horrible person. So,
right.
And like you said, I've seen plenty of incidents where inmates were protecting officers from being assaulted from other inmates. And like you said, the ones that have been in there for a while and learned, like you did, and learned different tools while they're in there and developed themselves and actually matured while they're in prison, behave a lot different than the guys that come in and out, whether it's a state jail side or county jail side, that are just in and out all the time and have very little regard for what they're doing to society. So that there are huge differences. And I can say, as a correctional officer, in the past, that not everybody in there is a bad person, so I get that aspect.
Yeah. And especially in there, you definitely couldn't act on temporary emotion in prison. So you definitely have to, because they end you up in the hole for 60 to 90 days or even longer, and so prison can teach you how to. That's why I tell people a lot of times too, when I would teach classes, I was like, if you can control yourself in here not to go to the hole, then you can control yourself out there not to go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's even a harder place, because you can go to the hole so easily over minor infractions. So if you can do that in there, you can definitely do it out here.
Well, I want to make sure that everyone can get in contact with your group. Is there a website? What's the best way to find you on there for the Prison Did Not Break Me group?
We just built our website. Actually, we just got that done today. It's prisondidnotbreakme.org, and the Facebook group is Prison Did Not Break Me. So they can get on the Prison Did Not Break Me, and we can approve them and get them on there, and they can share their story, or they can just watch posts and get support from it. And that's how we're growing right now.
Well, that's awesome, Sheen. I hope that you continue to grow. I hope you'll learn a lot with your nonprofit, and building that. So, we wish you the best on that.
Thank you.
We'd like to wrap up the show with our guests with the title of our show in mind, Actions and Limits, and ask, out of everything that you've learned moving forward, what would you say is one action that we can take in our lives that can really make a huge difference?
One action that can make a difference is really thinking choices, that action. And I'm really big as far as action physically. work out, get healthy, stay healthy. It makes you feel good about yourself. I think that if you learn self-love, everything else will fall in place. When you love yourself, you want the great things in life.
Sure. There's a lot in there. You talk about controlling your actions, be fit, stay physically fit, and just, that self-love. So a lot of little actions in there that we can take. The other side of that, we have these limits that we self-impose on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say is the most detrimental one that we need to make sure that we remove to be successful in our lives?
I would say something to remove from your life is self-doubt. Know that, if you can think it, you can do it. You can achieve it. Don't put self-limiting beliefs on yourself. Anything is possible. I mean, I was supposed to die in prison. I'm free. So, anything is possible. Just if you set your mind to something.
That's awesome, Sheena. Well, we appreciate your story. Thank you for sharing that with us. And, we hope you have continued success,
Thank you.
moving forward and helping others and continuing to coach people and really sharing the things you've learned along the way. So that's a pretty powerful story. So thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing that with us and with our audience.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it a lot.
Great. Thank you. All right, Paul, what an interesting guest Sheena was. Definitely, that's a lot of stuff to take away from a horrible situation where you end up thinking that you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. I can't imagine that. I can't imagine even putting myself in that place to where, having hope through where there is no hope.
It was very inspiring when she said anything's possible, and she said, look at me, I thought I was going to be life in prison and now I'm out.
Yeah.
I mean, that just really resonated with me, that she's right. Anything is possible. And she has the second chance in life, and she's taking it on full force and helping others, other prisoners and families, and she's pushing it forward. So serving, that is one of the biggest things that get you out of a rut, is serving others. And she is doing that. And that's what she learned in prison, and that's what she's learning now outside of prison. So kudos to her. I hope she continues to thrive, and I hope this nonprofit really takes off for her.
Yeah, she's taken what she discovered as her, identity in helping other people, helping inmates go through the process and learn and mature along the way. And now she's doing that, out in the free world. And like you said, I hope her nonprofit, Prison Did Not Break Me, is successful. And it sounds like there's a lot of people out there already. She's already got 600 followers, and they're, having some place to talk about that. How powerful is that? So yeah. So what a great guest. It was so interesting, talking with her, and we chatted with her a little bit off the air for a second. She talks about all the technical stuff that she was trying to figure out, cell phones and computers and stuff. So it's a lot of things that we take for granted, that, when you get removed from the world for a long period of time and then thrust back into it, think about how to handle all that. So
a quarter of a century.
It's crazy. So let's wrap up the show with another segment of Ask Paul Anything. Paul, you said you found a question in the email there.
I did, and I think because it being summertime, this was an appropriate question to ask.
Yeah, it's hot.
Yeah, exactly. So this is from Gina in Arizona, and her question is, Paul, what is your favorite fair food?
Fair food. Okay. All right. I'm ready for it, Paul.
I'm ready for it. I would, for some reason, and I'm not a sweets guy. By all means, I am not a sweets guy. But when I think of the fair, and I know there's great salty meats at the fair, but when I think of the fair, I think of the sweet stuff. So I was thinking either between the fried chocolate Twinkie or the traditional powdered funnel cake. And I got to go with the funnel cake right out of the oven. You take that first bite, and it's so moist, and the powdered sugar mixed with the cake. Oh man, that is good. So I'm not normally a sweets guy, but at the fair, you get me a good funnel cake, fresh out of that oven, I'm going with funnel cake. So that's my answer, my final answer.
Well, yeah, you brought up the deep fried chocolate Twinkie or whatever that. Oh
yeah.
My gosh.
Have you had the deep fried chocolate Twinkie?
No, I don't. I don't want to heart attack.
Don't knock it. Don't knock it until you try it, man. Heaven on earth.
I've seen some crazy stuff I don't know if it's just Texas, but at the Texas Fair, they've got deep fried butter, deep fried Coca-Cola, it's
anything
crazy.
you can fry, they have it, right?
Anything you could fry, they could have deep fried oil. It's just
yeah. Drink this.
Yeah. So it's crazy, but
yeah.
Funnel cake. Got you, Paul. All right. Good choice. I think that's the safe choice to go with. But I think I do remember you liking funnel cake as a kid though too. So great. So everyone, keep on sending your questions in to actionsandlimits@gmail.com, and you can have your questions featured on the show. Paul, another great guest. Yeah, great show, man.
For Justin Atherton, this is Paul Fortune. We'll see you next week.
All right. See you next month. Thank you for listening to the show. Don't miss an episode. Click and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on your favorite podcast platform and find us on Instagram and Facebook under Actions and Limits to stay updated on all our upcoming content. Continue to email the show at actionsandlimits@gmail.com for our segment Ask Paul Anything. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.